Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.
Excellent. So welcome to HR Studio Podcast, everybody. My name is Fred Bunsa, and I'm going to be your host for today's episode. Today, I'm really happy to have Jason Greer with us. Jason is the founder and president of Greer Consulting, which is a labor management and employee relations consulting firm. Jason is a speaker and a consultant. He has a background in counseling, training, and conflict resolution. He's also a great storyteller and just really a fun person to be with. He talks to audiences, he consults with them, and what his focus is managing through personal and corporate growth while also maintaining an intimate connection to the human components that define us and make cultures, organizational cultures, special. He also has a book called People Matter Most. No surprise there, that title with Jason's background. And we are just really happy to have you on the show today, Jason. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Fred. Thanks for having me. This is great.
I noticed, Jason, that one of the things that you offer to your clients is something that you call reverse risk consulting.
Right.
Can you tell our audience of rising HR leaders what that actually means?
Absolutely. So reverse risk consulting is just really a catchy title for, there's a lot of magic that we do, Fred. Okay, I'm having fun with you. It's not that much magic. Basically what we do is myself and my consultants will come into an organization and perform what we call a deep dive analysis, where we come in and we're getting to know your employees at an intimate level. We're hearing what their issues are. We're hearing what their concerns are, sort of the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization, but always coming from the perspective of, I'm an HR professional, or if I'm an executive, I'm always, what are the things that are keeping me up at night? What are the things I want to know about my employees? And more importantly, what are the things that we can do to make our good organization to a great organization, or a great organization to the best organization? So we give you really a critical analysis of where your employees are. But we also take the position that, you have some consultants who like to come in and be in forever, because that means their lights are still getting paid. The light bills start getting paid. From our perspective, we understand that our engagement is very finite, and we want to do whatever we can to make sure that we're building a bridge for you with your employees.
Interesting. So are you typically working with organizations that have unions or are trying to, eliminate unions? What is the typical organization that needs the kind of help that folks like you provide?
It's two prongs. So from the reverse risk consulting side, we typically deal with organizations that don't have unions. But I'm a former board agent with the National Labor Relations Board, and many of my consultants are, ex-HR professionals, or they are people who were part of labor unions, and they at one time were paid organizers. So organizations, whether they are currently represented by a union, have a union threat, or they don't have a union threat at all, will bring us in sort of to give a holistic perspective on what's going on internally.
Okay. And what are some mistakes that you see people making, typically in the HR, but even line leaders as well? Just they might have the right intentions, but it just doesn't quite hit the mark in terms of managing union avoidance, I guess you'd call it, or managing within a union environment.
One of the biggest mistakes I see, and I've just actually saw this about a month ago, is, so it's amazing to me how many managers will assume that just because they walk past one of their employees and give them a fist pound that they have a rapport. Right?
Okay. Fist pound doesn't equal rapport. Is that what you're telling me?
Fist pound does not equal rapport. Talking about sports doesn't equal rapport. Talking about the weather doesn't equal rapport. What we generally see is, in the mind of a manager, especially a busy manager, it's, my employees love me. The engagement scores look great. Everybody's happy. man, they're telling you what they think you want to hear because they want to preserve their jobs.
Okay.
If you don't have a true understanding of who they are as people, in my business, our tagline is people will work for money, but they'll die for respect and they'll die for recognition.
Wow, that's powerful.
Now, Fred, consider you and I. We just had the virtual fist bump. That was powerful. I felt you. I appreciate that.
I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it.
But understand that you and I come from different walks of life with different experiences. So how you want to be respected or how you want to be recognized might be fundamentally different than how I need to be recognized or respected. So for you, it might be, man, I just got this bonus check and I'm loving my company. For me, it might be, I just got this bonus check. I should love my company, but you know what? Every time I see my manager, he calls me by a different name. Or every time I see, the executive, she'll look at me, she'll give me the consummate smile and then keep walking, but she has no idea who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm. So what, it sounds in some ways like the impossible task. So you've got, 30 people in your department, and that means there could be 30 ways to respect and recognize them.
Absolutely.
What does a busy manager do? How do our listeners coach and counsel their line leaders for working in an environment like that?
In union avoidance campaigns, you will typically have what they call a 24-hour speech, where an executive or a leader, line level leader, whatever the case might be, will get up in front of a group of employees and she will sort of bare her soul. And she'll ask for a second chance. Please don't go union. Please be with me.
Got it.
Be with the organization and give us a second chance. What I generally tell leaders is imagine that every day for you is the 24-hour speech. And there are some days that you're going to get it right. And there's some days that you're going to get it wrong. But be vulnerable enough to admit when you get it right, and also be vulnerable enough to admit when you get it wrong. That's what your employees see.
Interesting. So it's just a regular daily mindset that I got to win their minds and their hearts.
Absolutely. And what you'll find is, let's say that you use an example that you used. Let's say you have 30 employees, but you're a busy leader. It just takes a positive interaction with 5 employees for the word to spread that you're somebody who's approachable, that you're somebody who cares. When we talk about having an open door policy, that's not just putting a door stopper on your door, right? And giving the symbolic gesture that the door is open. It's, you see somebody walking past your office, even if you only have 5 minutes before your next meeting, ask that person, come on in. I just want to see how things are going. Is there something I can do for you?
Yeah. So it's planting a lot of seeds like that, little things all along the way, versus coming up with a killer 24-hour speech that, has to undo a year or longer of lack of maybe respect and maybe lack of recognition.
Exactly. Because when people feel like you care, and I know we're talking sort of touchy-feely, sort of, the intangibles, but it's the intangibles that fundamentally matter to people. It's the intangibles that will make an average employee a good employee, because they want to be better, not just in terms of their career development, but they want to be better for you, because that's what you bring out of them.
So is it doing these intangibles, Jason, we do a lot of coaching. And so I'm just thinking about if somebody I was coaching was struggling with something like this, how would I get them to build it into their routine? Is it based on, if I was coaching you, is it based on your personality, the things I think you would be good at doing that we ask you, I would say, let's put a plan together? Or is it more based on the receiver on your team, the different styles on your team? How do you suggest people think about and do that?
And that's an awesome question. I think if I were going to coach, let's say that I'll give an example of coaching an accountant who, with all due respect to my accountant sisters and brothers out there, sometimes there's the great deal of personality that likes being in front of people. Other times there are personalities that like being sort of behind the scenes, crunching the numbers, doing the data analysis, things like that. It would really come from the perspective of understanding them first, because we don't want to give them a bunch of bullet points, have them memorize a bunch of lines, and then go out there and completely flub themselves in front of them.
Sure.
Right? So it'd be more understanding who they are, understanding what they're comfortable with, coaching, and in your experience, coaching, an element of coaching is pride, but then knowing when to pull back, right? But it's also understanding the person that they're going to interact with. How do they want to be interacted with? And really, I think it comes down to spend time with them. Because the more time you spend with people who aren't like you, the more you will sort of develop a routine, because you'll get a better understanding of who they are. But they'll also get a better understanding of who you are.
Interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the more precious commodities that leaders seem not to have is time, but it really has to be a prioritization. And I know sometimes when I'm coaching someone in that regard, I'll say, you don't have to add a whole bunch of new things into your agenda. Just make the time that you're spending, use the same time you're spending on a project to use a little bit of that time for some interaction as well. So, intersect your personal agenda with your project agenda.
I love that. Exactly.
Jason, is there any, I don't know, are there any other secret formulas that you use or that our listeners can try that you've seen work along the way?
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring your listeners into the secret ingredient. So this is top secret. I wish I had trademarked this before we got on this podcast, but unfortunately I didn't.
All right. So you're giving us the good stuff here.
I'm still going to give you the good stuff. The biggest secret that I have for managers to implement some of these things is go to the break room. If you're in an organization that has a break room, go to the break room and just sit and just be present, right? And I say that because, look, I've been a part of over 98 union avoidance campaigns, and we have some of the best PowerPoints in the industry. We have some of the best strategy in the industry. But when all is said and done, it's generally that manager who said, forget this, forget your advice. I'm just going to go talk to my people.
Interesting.
When they get in and when they sit, when they're present, when all of a sudden they find out that John and his wife just had a baby,
mm-hmm.
or they find out that Adam and Steve just got married the other day, now all of a sudden we're starting to have these conversations. That's the bridge builder.
That's interesting. So it's as simple as making those human connections. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but it sounds like what you're saying is the other strategies can really become pretty inept if it doesn't rest on a bed of, or a foundation of caring and personal outreach and personal connection.
Yeah, when you memorize a bunch of bullet points and that's what you're regurgitating, people can sense that from a mile away, right? But when you're coming from the perspective of, I might have a title, but at my core, I'm just a human being doing my best to get through this, just like you are.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you'd be amazed at the bridges that you can build with that.
Interesting. So another question I have is how do we discuss, in today's day and age, how do we discuss diversity and inclusion in the workplace in a way that is proactive, is not insensitive? I mean, it seems like it's the kind of thing where you're supposed to talk about it, but nobody quite knows how because everybody's afraid of being offensive in some way. So I don't know, do you have some thoughts on ways that our podcast audience can approach that?
Absolutely. I would say the first approach should be a vulnerable approach.
A vulnerable approach?
Vulnerable approach.
Okay, that sounds scary. So tell me more.
It can be scary. And I'm going to say this. So when I was 17, I was the victim of cross burnings by the Knights of Ku Klux Klan. And so I'm dating myself here, but it was in 1991. And I will tell you that there was no foolproof method on how to talk about this other than to talk about it, right? What happens generally, and we come from a brain-based perspective, that when I'm interacting with people who aren't like me, my brain sort of goes into what we call a threat state.
Yeah.
Where I was going to get scared because they are members of my out group, not members of my in group. But the best way to bridge, and I keep using the term bridge, but I love it. The best way to bridge and to start having those effective conversations is by taking a step forward and just saying, hey, look, I just want to talk to you. I just want to get to know you. I just want to get to know where you come from. Because what I generally hear from employees of color, if I can use that term, is that whenever diversity comes up, they can sort of see their managers who may happen to be white. They're scared to talk about this, but they're scared to talk about it, not necessarily because they might have racist ideas, but they're scared to talk about it because they don't want to do or say anything offensive, because that's the climate that we exist in now.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
But what we found is when people are willing to have that critical conversation that starts with, Fred, this is going to be tough for me to deal with, or tough for me to talk about because I don't want to offend you, but here's my truth.
Okay. So you lead with, this is going to be tough. I'm uncomfortable, but it's something I really need to share with you, or to speak with you about.
Absolutely. This is my truth. This is how I see things, but I want to understand how you see it.
Okay.
And what you hear might be uncomfortable because it might not be anything you've ever heard before.
Yeah.
Or it might, in some form or fashion, it might do something to offend your sensibilities. But the more you engage in these conversations, and I keep coming back to that, the more you engage in these conversations, all of a sudden from a brain perspective, I'm no longer seeing you as a member of my out group. Now we're starting to form commonalities where we're part of each other's in group.
Interesting. And so the repetition of it gets your comfort level up. It also, a higher level of comfort means you're probably more relaxed, and your interactions could be a little bit more genuine, a little bit more natural. So sounds like there's some momentum that gets built.
Yeah, there's momentum, but there's also the understanding that, like any relationship or anytime you talk about a tough subject, man, we might strike gold. We might have the best conversation on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we sort of go right back to, we're still building. Still building. And then you get into a tough topic like politics in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we go a couple steps backward. But at the same time, there has to be, in some form or fashion, there has to be this understanding that even if we take a couple steps backward, we're still going to build enough of trust with each other that we're going to make it through this.
Yeah. I think I've always said to people, signal positive intent, which is what you suggested on the upfront piece is, this is going to be tough. I really want to speak to you about this, but I'm confident that even if we don't agree on, the issue at hand, I think we can both agree that we want to make this work together. We want to enhance the dialogue that we have with one another. So the outcome can be common understanding and consensus. It may not get there, but you can at least have mutual understanding and mutual respect.
Exactly.
And it sounds like that can be an effective short-term outcome. If you can't get to consensus, at least you can get to a greater degree of understanding and respect.
Yeah, and the other side of that, when we talk about a greater understanding of respect, is I have to respect you enough, and I hope that we can respect each other enough that we can agree to agree. We can also agree to disagree. But
Sure.
Behind it, whether we agree to agree or agree to disagree, we do so peacefully.
Jason, this has been really fascinating. As we wrap up, what I wanted to see is any final advice that you'd have for our audience of rising HR leaders, or in fact, any kind of leader who wants to be able to accomplish the kinds of things you've been talking about in the workplace?
Absolutely. The greatest advice that I have, again, I should have trademarked this, but I didn't, so I'm just going to give it. The greatest advice I have to your listeners, to the HR professionals that are out there: relax. Just relax. You all are tasked with so many responsibilities between, the personnel issues, between the business issues, between employee relations issues. What I say to HR professionals across the country is this: I want you to realize just how valuable you are and how valuable you are to the business. Because when I come in, if I come in on the labor relations side, the first question people ask is, where's HR in all this? Right? It's not until the house is sort of burning down that people recognize how important you are. So relax. Understand that you deserve a seat at the table, not just by title, but by function, by who you are. Be present, be bold, take bold steps, admit when you get it wrong, be proud of the times when you get it right, but keep going forward and just relax because you got this.
You got this. All right. Well, Jason Greer, thank you so much for joining us today on HR Studio Podcast. We really appreciate the conversation that we've had. And for those of you who are listening but not yet subscribers, we encourage you to visit hrstudiopodcast.com to sign up for a subscription. And there you'll also find the show notes. You'll find links to Jason and his social media handles. Jason has also been kind enough to give us one of his thought pieces called the top 6 labor relations issues and how to mitigate those, how to work through those. So we'll have the link to that in our show notes as well. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today on HR Studio Podcast.
Brett, it's always a pleasure. You were awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.